Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Startup Saturday. Our guest today is Archana Hingorani. Archana is the founder of Siana Capital and a woman in finance, a woman who has led the whole space of venture capitals in the country. So I'm delighted to invite her. Archana, congratulations on doing Siana Capital. We had a brief conversation when you had started some years ago, and here, thank you for coming again to talk about startups at a time when startups have become even more important in our country. There's a lot of buzz around them, and we'd look forward to hear your experiences and perspectives on this.
Thank you, Deepa. Lovely to come back. I know we had a story play out last time, so I'm happy to reconnect and talk about what's happened since then.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it was 2 years ago since, and it's over 2 years that we spoke. Uh, so, what has been the journey like at Siana Capital for you? Where have the thrust and the attention for you most been?
So in the private investing world, the most important piece is the entrepreneur that you select, right? At one level, I started to wear a hat of an entrepreneur in 21 because this is a small shop I set up with a couple of people, and so we were sort of like a startup, but not in its true sense because the business model was frozen. We were not taking any risk on whether this product will work in the market, etc. Very well established old style investing, but in a new avatar, let's put it that way. But underneath that layer is what's probably more interesting for the audience, which is to invest in private structures, and select entrepreneurs to help them in their journey, of course, but to also have that hat which says that you're selecting the right kind of entrepreneurs from two perspectives. One, the whole business of private investment is about trust of your investors who are giving you money in fiduciary capacities. And to layer it, the most important piece, as I said earlier, is the selection process. And it's not about what does a business plan look like, does it grow really quickly. Of course, all of that financial piece is really important and sort of drives numbers and how you enter and what price you enter at. But what's most important is the piece about um, seeing whether you can work with them. There are many who are brilliant, probably don't need you except for your money, and probably won't take any advice from you, but they are startups, so they do need a lot of help. So selecting entrepreneurs or teams of entrepreneurs who are willing to work, I think, has also changed over the years. Earlier it was easier. Let's say if you go back even 30 years ago, startups are not new to India. They've been there for a bit. It's just that they came into, suddenly everybody wants to be a startup and do a startup and invest in a startup, probably, post the, let's say, the digitization era, which has sort of allowed Indian companies to be sort of selected, be in the limelight, become unicorns, etc., which has created all the buzz. But it's not a new concept from, even from an India perspective. And the type of entrepreneurs you had earlier were more, seasoned corporates who would set up new ventures, and you were working with them. They understood how one is supposed to work. But in today's world, everybody who has an engineering degree, or even an undergrad in some faculty, are always looking to become entrepreneurs, right? So trying to pick from that whole motley group of entrepreneurs the right kind is quite a, it's not a challenge, but it's an art that you need to develop over time. And
And
for
what,
us,
what,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
so for us in particular, we are more focused on science, technology, engineering, innovation. So you added that complexity layer to the startup layer. And then, of course, from my learnings and experiences, I wanted to make sure that all entrepreneurs that we back, whether male or female, would have huge hygiene factor as far as sustainability goes, right? So adding that, of course, it does mean gender ratios, better DEI. It also means environment. It means corporate governance, etc. Something
Yes.
many entrepreneurs probably don't appreciate when they are 6 months old, 1 year old, and they're like, do you want me to run the business, or do you want me to look after all these things? To me, it's a habit, how you treat and make kids learn good things in life early, and they remember them for the rest of their life. I think sustainability is one of those. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, so it's a startup, then there is technology, science, and then there is this thing that we're thrusting on them, sort of. Many of them get it if they are already in, let's say, in the waste environment, clean technologies, they get it. But the others, obviously, it's not obvious to them how it's important, beneficial for the world, but more importantly, they don't get it that it also leads to improved valuations for their companies. So, yeah.
So is there like a certain number that you nurture at, and how do you manage your,
So,
your time and
yeah, so we
attention?
correct, correct. So there are different strategies. Many fund houses will say, look, we don't have the ability to sort of handhold everybody. We will make a portfolio, and in that portfolio, which will be sizable because you're playing with averages, and there will be some that we will sort of handhold. The others, hopefully, will have the ability to run on their own, and there might some people who fall off the way because while it was a good idea to begin with, didn't end up being the best idea. So yeah, you can do that. But given that we're a small shop, purposely a small shop, focused on wanting to work with each entrepreneur. I think, based on so many years of having done all these things, I think every senior individual can definitely handle 2 to 3 companies. So if you're a team of 5, 6 people, a, a portfolio of 8 to 10 companies in a single fund is not that it's not difficult, it is achievable. And I think we are also in a newer world. 15 years ago, you would have had to do everything yourself in terms of resources, even if you were an institutional fund. But today, you want resources. They're available all across the world at the drop of a hat. So it's also a little bit easier to be able to seek advice, seek ideas beyond where you're sitting with the entrepreneur. I'm assuming at some point in time, both of us are biased. You're inside, he's inside, and I think this world is much easier to also bring in outside resources. So all told, I would say, a fund portfolio of 10 to 12 companies where you're nurturing quite a few of them is highly doable. It's a lot of work and obviously a lot of stress because every day things change, but it's still something that we can do with reasonable abilities.
And in these past few years, have
Yeah.
you seen the profile of these people who have their startups change, and therefore their needs also are very different?
Yeah, as I said, because earlier you were working and backing, even if it was, let's say, an entrepreneur, you were backing him because he had been a serial entrepreneur, let's say even 10 years ago, right? But today there is nobody waiting to get expertise to start a new business, right? Because thankfully for India, the ecosystem has started to develop. I mean, we are not exactly the Silicon Valley, but we do have strong attributes in the sense that there is enough ability for let's say, um, graduates that have done a few years of, maybe even 3 years of work, some right out of college, etc., to come up with ideas and get them funded, which was sort of impossible, let's say, I would say, even 5 years ago. Nobody wanted to really take the risk. I mean, of course, there were the angel investors and your friends and family who would fund you, but from a structured format, it would have been very difficult. So I'm saying that that nature of the entrepreneur obviously has changed, which means that you do have to make a choice whether you want to back everybody who's young, or you want a good mix. Because it would be like saying, I have we have 10 kids, you have to look after all of them because they're all some aspect of them is immature. They may have the, let's say, the expertise from the education background or even from their work background, but maturity to run a company, lead teams, have goals, discuss strategy, all of that comes, in different flavors, and that becomes very apparent in today's world of startups, that you need to select on that basis. I mean, some of them, some personalities are, very open, some are closed, some are, brain damaging some days, because they're so nervous they want to talk all the time. So you have to decide. So in my head, just like any portfolio, you'd always say, let's allocate time to the ones that need it the most. So how do you do that? So I'm saying that, maybe in a portfolio of 10, you take 3 or 4 who are really young. And by young, you mean late 20s, early 30s, because they will really need hand holding. They may have the idea, but they think they know because they don't know any better. But I'm sure that they will come to roadblocks that will need a lot of attention. So I would say I would try and do maybe not more than 3 or 4 that are that young. And then I would take the middle approach for another 3 or 4 where, they've worked with organizations. Maybe they've even had P&L responsibilities, but have never done it in their, like they are the MD, they are the CEO, they're making decisions. So they know how it cuts, but not just like me, not in 21 when, not 21, 19 when we started. We spoke in 21 when we started in 19. I mean, I been running a large organization for many many years, but to run it of your own accord, of your own team, without support, sort of, in a large institutional environment or corporate, you have tons of people doing legal and tons of people doing, admin and
Yes.
all of that, which in a small setup you have to do everything yourself, right? So
Yeah.
to understand what that means, especially for people who have been inside large organizations and come up, and the bulk of people are from that ilk in today's world, right? They think that it's working so well, it's their idea inside an organization, why not take it out? But what
Correct.
you don't get when you do that is you can take it out, but you still have to then do everything, which means that you're
Yeah.
not going to be 100% be able to just focus on, let's say, either the product or whatever. I mean, you have to focus on people, you have to focus on strategy, you have to focus on regulation in some sectors. There's so much going on besides, the idea of trying to run a new company. So, there
Yeah.
are always
Yeah.
those choices that one needs to make.
And what has been the most rewarding moment of being your own, you know, your own boss? In a sense, you've been a CEO large companies, but here doing it for yourself. What is the most rewarding of
So to be
this journey?
candid, like I was pointing out, there are a lot of things that you normally would not, as a CEO of an large corporate, you would not have spent any time doing so many other things, right? Trying to do those alongside, and the initial journey, or let's say the rush of one doing something on your own, being your own boss, is probably exciting, but it wanes very quickly when you have to, put so much time and effort into that aspect rather than what you're really trained for so many years. So
Yeah.
you're learning new skills from that perspective. So while it's not, I'm not trying to make it out to be a negative, but it's new skill sets that you need to learn. I wouldn't even say new skill sets. I would say you probably did all those things, let's say, in the beginning of your career. Everybody does everything, right? But you
Yeah.
haven't done it for so many years. You have to come back to that space. That takes a little bit of effort. But I think the most compelling piece of being in this, let's say, in this subsector, is the fact that, you get to meet so many young people every day. The energy that you get off them, which allows you to create your own energy, I think is a different high.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And of course, because they're all different companies, right? You're not investing in the same people.
Correct.
You also have that slight luxury. I'm only calling it slight because it comes with a lot of other baggage of deciding every day what you want to work on today. Like, let me look at my cancer drug company today versus let me look at, a B2B company tomorrow, which allows you to, sort of not be, let's say, uh, so dragged into just one thing. You have multiple things to look into and talk to. people, etc. So I just feel that while that was already there, even in a larger format, the same thing is there. You get to look at different companies, work with different companies, but when you do it in a smaller, let's say, format, which is what I'm doing right now, you interact a whole lot more with the entrepreneur. Otherwise, you have teams of people doing that and sort of giving it up to you and only asking you to walk in if there's an issue, right? But this
Yeah,
is like the whole thing, which I think is very different from earlier.
yeah. So, Archana, you in the last conversation said that as a young girl you wanted to be a doctor, and then you changed, you went to economics, did your PhD, and taught. Somewhere, the science and technology, is it at some level fulfilling that aspiration around healthcare that you have, or a love or a passion? I mean, what drives you in this area of healthcare?
So I I'm not sure I have that personality, which and maybe deep down I'm not sure, I've not done the analysis of it, but I think my sense of wanting to get up and go the next morning has always been past learnings and what that is telling me, and it's in many situations it's been a sixth sense. So
Wow.
I think about 2014 or 15, if I remember correctly, I was invited by by the University of Pittsburgh, where I used to teach, to come and talk about this sector, right? And at that time, I had no intention of doing what I was doing today, and I wanted to talk about India as an emerging piece. In the US, at least, even in 2014, 15, there were a lot of people, maybe even true today, who don't even know where we are on the map, right? They hear the word, but they sort of don't know, right? Especially non New York, San Francisco, Chicago. You leave those cities out and you don't really have any broad understanding. And while talking to them and sort of thinking about what the future looks like, I only said two things. And I said, in my head, the next 20, 30 years, one needs to focus on impact and technology, because it will change the world. Not that I could have guessed what AI and chat GPT would do, but I just felt that business transformation had already started as a precursor to technology transformation around 2007 8. We were already seeing it in companies, that if you did some kind of change to your business format, which was different from the older formats, you tended to survive a whole lot better, especially post GFC, when quite a few people, suffered. People, companies, employees suffered significantly. So those two were my learnings, and it was not like,
Hmm.
it may have been sounding like, I'm thinking about this like as a new idea, but I think it was built up on the 150 plus companies we had funded, looked
Yes.
at, grown, etc., right? So I think it was more that than
Deep knowledge which had sort
yes,
of seeped in,
yes,
and then come back to
yes.
you as intuition and
Correct,
instinct.
correct.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the big, uh, you know, uh, areas that you want? So sometimes it could be proactively wanting some type of industry, or some kind of, like, I want a startup who's doing this, because you already have a sense that you are looking at those as opportunities. Does that happen? Are there some areas where you're looking at? Could it, I don't know, I mean, something about robotics, or high tech, and what is it that is the next big thing that you want to bet on?
So not sure that that's the way I would think about it, only because
Hmm.
I've already set that bar in 19, saying that we will only look
Yeah,
at high technology, high impact, high moat, high
correct,
innovation. So you've
correct.
already said that, right? But you have to remember that in the investing world, you're still in India, which has a
Yeah.
lot of risks, right?
Hmm.
So you cannot turn around and say, now that I've set my theme, in that theme I will say I will invest in sector A or B.
Okay.
Once having said that idea, I want to be opportunistic.
Yeah.
Probably won't. I know that I will not do B2C, not because you cannot make returns on it or you cannot get excited about an entrepreneur, but it's because you need a whole lot of capital for that. So you wouldn't go after those companies because you want to be meaningful to the entrepreneur for at least 4 or 5 years and not become sidelined as soon as you drop the capital into his cap table, right? So
Correct.
because of that, you would want to look at companies that are across sectors, because in from a financial hat, which is your primary hat, you need to create diversified pools, right,
Yeah.
of portfolios. So diversification can come from this sectoral idea of being opportunistic. It can come from managing to put in money not across different stages. So some are sort of, early revenue, some, and startup world early revenue. I'm not talking about, mature companies. Early revenue, some are showing signs of 12, 15 crore top line, some are showing signs of, 50 crore top line. So you're sort of diversifying at, the revenue level, taking away the risk of, like idea startup, which we don't do because we are a fiduciary. You don't want to take money, at least still don't have the guts to do that, take money and put into startups which doesn't belong to you. It belongs to, third parties. And similarly, like I said, pick your entrepreneurs so that they're not all, in entrepreneurial age, they're not all toddlers, right? You want
Correct.
some differentiation there, as well as, trying to make sure that we invest over time and not try and do it like today. I mean, if you look at startup, the word startup and winter funding sort of comes together, pops up on every Google screen if you just try and use that word. So one would inherently assume that must be the best time to invest. There's nobody else giving money. Why don't I just put all my money today, right? But people forget that its entry price is one sm- significant but one part of it. There are so many other things that need to go right, and the thing that goes most wrong is cyclicality of economic cycles. Like when you're ready to exit an investment and the financial crisis hit, you had to sit for 3 years and do nothing, right? And imagine if you had put all your investments at the same point in time, they all would be stuck
Hmm.
because of the same reason, right? So you try and do investments spread over time so that they're all not stuck because of one broad economic thing, right? So those are the kind of things you do to build a portfolio more than saying, what am I excited about? But having said that, I would say that our last portfolio was very interesting from a build up perspective because we were able to do sectors that are not that avant garde from a technology perspective, but have moved into technology enough that you can see that they are it's fitted for them. I cannot go to a sector and say you have to use the latest technology when, in their maturity cycle from a market perspective or buyer demand perspective, or buyer influence perspective. Nobody wants that technology piece, it won't work, right? But nonetheless, we want to be able to move all sectors towards technology because that it's coming. And we're not in a bubble anymore as a country. We're not I'm forgetting the term. In the global financial crisis, everybody said India was decoupled, right? And as if that thing didn't happen to us, right? But it came after us, after 2 years, with such a vengeance, only because we are now an open economy from many many
Correct.
perspectives, right? So keeping all of that in mind, I would say, we did one company which is a probiotic clean product for industrial applications, in textile, leather, paper. You use a lot of chemicals, and this company replaces all of them with non-chemicals, right? Very interesting and very good because it's not your software startup which has to build X number of, customers every day and a SaaS model. It's not that, but it is high tech innovation from an engineering perspective, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, we have SaaS software companies that are making production for manufacturing much more efficient. Both very different spectrums, but very interesting. That's why I said, it's very interesting to get to work every day, because you have to think about different pieces, and that sort of
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
So in your what a typical day, how much time do you get for yourself for your own reading and study, or is it a lot of external facing? Do you struggle on that part of just having the space, creating the space for yourself
So you're
as a
right.
very set? Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right that, in today's world, I don't think there's any profession that can subsist without reading. But thankfully, because of so much inundation of things, you do get during the day. I mean, even if you analyze your phone, it will tell you how much time you spent on reading pullouts, etc. And I think all of us do that a fair bit. Reading from a thought perspective is also quite important. Yes, so we do spend time. Do I struggle? I think I only struggle with the fiction part of reading, which I'm not able to do. But I think there's enough because this is it's a business about knowledge more than anything
Yeah,
else, right?
exactly.
And experience. So yes, it forms a significant part of it. But equally, we do struggle because we do have, as I said, you have to look after so many other pieces which are not necessarily front and center about the product that you are focused on.
Do you also end up reading more on entrepreneurship? Is there like a favorite book?
I try to read. I feel that on entrepreneurship I would be biased. I somehow feel that because I've been doing this for now 30 plus years, and anybody else telling m- me about their experiences makes me think about mine, and then I realize that they may be different because it's the Indian context. But I'm reading right now. I like history, so I'm now reading it's called The Real Story of Interest, how the word interest was coined, the price of time, by Edward Chancellor, if I remember correctly. And I'm reading that. So for me, entertainment reading is more these kind of things. Yeah.
Amazing. And just if you were to tell me what's your own style of leadership and coaching, how do you work with these? Uh, is it coaching forward? Does it are you expected to do more mentoring? How does it?
So I think one of the things that works with most people who are sort of working alongside you, or even maybe rungs below you in terms of experience, uh, I've found that consensus driven leadership styles work a whole lot better. So I'm not as smart as the older generation, which would make you think it's your idea. I don't think I make them think it's their idea, but I'm more open to making them think about it, come back. If they disagree with what I'm saying, try and tweak it a little bit to get their viewpoint in. Over many years, I've seen that style work best for me, especially in an environment where you have. In a country like India, over the years, you've had biases towards female leadership, you've had biases towards, you know, um, I've also faced bias because, people said, "Hey, you're a PhD, you don't know anything, right? Because you come from that tower that only starts to, think about theory, etc., and no practicality." So I'm just saying that over time, my sense is that this style with matches my personality, and I use that to the best of my ability to get stuff going and things happening.
Also, Archana,
Yeah.
is there any startup that you have been thinking about a lot and wistfully saying, I wish we had invested in them?
I would say no. Only reason I'm saying this to you is that think of the way the statistics work for us. We look at we look at 1 in 100 companies that finally we put money in. So we
Correct.
and are not to say that we are pouring through every 100 to get that one. You probably sift out 50, maybe the next 20, 30, you do a little bit work, and then you focus on maybe 10, 12, and say, okay, out of this, and then you come back and you do a lot of work on two or three, and then finally maybe you select one, right?
Correct.
So in all of that, I have never, quite honestly, I've never seen any company where I've said, "Oh, I wish I had invested," because
Okay.
there are many companies which have been successful and are unicorns, and you will see that despite becoming unicorns, many investors have lost money on them, because the trick is not only about getting the company right, it is also about entering right and exiting at the right time. If you're not
Ah,
in that zone, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
right? So therefore there is no such thing as, I lost a good opportunity. In my head there's no such thing, at least, because this is not about, just selecting. It is about selecting, it is about working with them, it is about then finding the right people or institutions or strategic partners who can come in and replace you and do it at the right time. So there are so many factors, so you can't just talk about it and say, okay, I wish I had done that. Yeah.
And one last thing, what is it that you want to do in the next 3 years vis-a-vis Siana, and what is it that is your
I would
top
like to
on
see,
charts?
yeah, my top thought is to, in the next 3 years, obviously, we need to create a good track record from what we've already invested, because that's how you get more, better rounds of new money to invest. But I think that that has its natural course and will happen. What I am focused on for the next 3 years is to create that second layer, which then becomes what I do, and hopefully I get marginalized over 6 7 years, and then people. The idea to create this was not to sort of have like something. This is what I started. Blah blah blah. It was more to create ability to create a partnership style model where people keep coming in, and that's how the big boys anyways, the KKRs and Blackstones of this world were formed many many years, moons ago, since maybe the early 1900s or whatever. But I'm saying that's the idea behind what I wanted to do. So this is how we are thinking internally, that we need to nurture that next layer so that they can go about trying to do the same things and hopefully have more energy. I'm sure that we both know each of our ages. It's not like you can keep doing this for the next 20 odd years. So yeah.
Phenomenal. And I really hope that Siana Capital, you mentioned KKR, you mentioned Blackstone, and really a company that you're looking to build to last. Uh, and I wish you all the best for
Thank
that. Archana, a delight to talk to you. 30 minutes never enough, but we'll close. I don't know where the time went. So thank you for doing
thank
this.
No, no, thank you, Deepa. Always pleasure and fun talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank